this morning, so really exciting. I'm hoping we'll have a good interaction. So, I love to have my students interact with me as much as possible. So, just a few words about myself, and we'll jump into our topic. My mother liked Elvis Presley too much, if you ask me. So that's how I got the name. My sister, I have a twin sister. Her name is Alina, like somebody here. I see I have an older brother. His name is Konstantin. And Elena is my older sister. But for me, somehow I got Elvis, not a usual name in Romania either. So I'm based in Bucharest, Romania, close to you guys. I have a lot of friends from Ukraine. So again, a privilege to be with you. Um, so we will get into an interesting topic about self-leadership. Obviously, you're here, you're in this program because you want to lead effectively others. But interested, and we can use the chat window. I would be interested to know, as you think about leading yourself in order to effectively lead others, what comes to your mind? So, in other ways, what are some ways, some things you're doing even today, these weeks, these months, to effectively lead yourself better? Would you use the chat to write your thoughts? So how do you lead yourself better today um, to lead others better? So thank you, Diana. Discipline, virtues, motivation, discipline, routine. Very good. What else? What do you do as you think about self-leadership? What comes to your mind? Strategy. Good. Good. Please keep I would love to know what you're thinking. So, discipline again, Victoria, thank you. Future plans. Good. Consistence. That's a very important word. Yeah. Avoiding people pleasing and focusing on self. Diana, that's very, very profound. Would love to. I'm a coach, so whenever I find a good answer, would definitely would love to hear more. Yeah. So definitely we understand that leading others takes a lot of self-leadership. So what I would love for us to do today is unpack self-leadership a little bit. And I would like for us to look, first of all, of why is it important and how does it affect leadership? What are some of the barriers that we're facing against better leadership? And then what would be some solutions? Obviously, a lot of things we can talk about, but I will only focus on a few things. And then we'll take about 10 minutes for questions if that's okay with you. So with no further ado, let me share my screen. I hope I can do it. Yeah. Let me know if you guys see my screen. All
Yes.
good?
Yeah, everything is.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. So let's jump into the topic. And again, whenever you have a question, a thought, a comment, please write it in the chat. Would love to interact with you this way as well. Great. So we have a team here, obviously from a different kind of activity that maybe we're used to it. But what is an effective team? And as we think about this topic, about this definition of a team, um, we realize that leading teams is not actually that easy because we want people to become interdependent. Obviously, we want them to become dedicated to a common goal. Leadership is not easy because we want to see people choosing to collaborate, not being forced to collaborate. And that's not an easy task. And obviously, the most important thing is achieving exceptional results. As you think about your role as a leader, what do you think is most difficult? to achieve as you look at this definition? Please use the chat. What do you think is most difficult? What would be your greatest, or maybe is already your greatest challenge? Collaboration. Good. What else? Results, for sure. Thank you, Mihail. Goals, a common goal. So different people, different answers, for sure. But somebody needs to, okay, thank you. Diana says not to lose focus when working with others. It's often hard to not be too understanding, taking into account people's feelings before the goal. Yes, very good, Diana. So not easy. It doesn't mean that somebody gives us the hat to become a CEO or a team leader, and for some reason, just because we're nice, things happen. Exceptional results take a lot of work, and it's less about the results and how we work with people. So let's look at this team from another perspective, shall we? The reality is, as research studies are being done, the reality of our boat, of our team, is often this one. Only 3 people are actively bringing direction, speed to the team. They bring effort and help the team go towards those exceptional results. 5 people are looking, and 2 are trying to jump out of the boat or to sink the boat. So I know this sounds a little weird, but Gallup is doing every year research, and the reality is that globally, only 23% are engaged. That means they're putting effort into helping the boat move faster, move in the direction of a common goal. 59 are rather looking, and 18% are actively disengaged. As you think about this reality, and look, in Europe, things are even worse. South Asia is doing a bit better. We're okay, but Europe is not doing so great. So as you think about this reality, what comes to your mind? What do you think is the impact, the result, the effect because of this reality? So put in your chat your thoughts, because this is the reality of every team, of every business, everywhere in the world you go. The reality is only up to 30% of your people will really put an effort, and they will be engaged, they will be motivated, they will be enthusiastic about their work, they will be ready to put extra time and effort. And the reality is often 59% will say, this wasn't my job, nobody taught me how to do this. Actually somebody else's, it's somebody else's responsibility. I shouldn't be doing this. Why do you want this from me? This is too much. They will be doing the minimum necessary, not the maximum desired. And the worst of the problem is 18% of your team will be actively disengaged. They will be constantly commenting, complaining. They will say, this is wrong. My boss is a horrible leader. He doesn't know how to do his job. I can't wait to leave this team. I can't wait for a better job to come my way. This is the reality of every team. So as you're thinking about this, and the fact that you will be in a position, or you are already in the position of leading a team like this, what comes to your mind? It's difficult. Alexander says people who really put an effort will only get more exhausted. Yeah, not bad, but more difficult. Obviously for leaders is very difficult. Question is how to recognize 23%. Yes, many of my students often say, yeah, how do I know who are the engaged ones? But it's pretty daunting, isn't it? It's discouraging, but this is the job of a leader. This is our bread and butter every day, every morning. This is what we have to deal with. And in a sense, if you want to be a good leader, this is your job, to realize this reality and change it. And get those people who are not engaged or actively disengaged to be engaged. As I said, the reality in Europe is even worse. Job climate leads to a reality of only 13%. So only one person, 0.3, is really bringing extra effort. The rest of 72% are watching, and 15% of them are complaining. So how do we lead effective teams with this reality? That's the question we're trying to answer. So let's jump in to, first of all, understand what's our role. How do we lead ourselves better to prepare for this kind of a reality? And then what would be some things that we constantly need to focus on? And research again says that 70% of the responsibility comes in the hands of the manager. In other words, if the manager does a great job, he can change this reality tremendously. So if that's your reality in the team you're leading, there's 70% chance that if you do your job well as a manager, as a leader, you can change this reality. And it's true for every industry, every situation, any context. And it doesn't matter if it's Romania, if it's Ukraine or US, leaders have 70% chances to change that reality if they do something well. John Maxwell, I'm sure you've heard about him. He was asked at a conference, John, what is your greatest challenge as a leader? Without thinking too long, John paused and said, leading myself has been, is, and will be the greatest challenge for me as a leader. And we recognize that often leaders talk about, changing others, changing that environment. But John says, no, it starts with leading ourselves. If we do a good job in leading ourselves, then leading others will be easy. And let's look at this reality. And maybe you've seen this picture before, but the truth is, when we look at people and their success, yeah, we often see kind of the visible part of the iceberg. We see the results, we see the perks, the money, the benefits. But we often don't see that underneath it is a lot of work, a lot of leading yourself. And I work with leaders all day long. I coach management teams, CEOs, I train. I'm part of a global, I work with McDonald's in the global team, in the business analytics team. I often see this. It's because of how leaders lead themselves that they're ultimately able to lead others. And leaders are those people when everybody says it won't work, don't even try it, leaders say, yes, it will. When many people say, why bother? You can't do anything about the situation. Drop it, don't even bother. Leaders say, no, I should bother. I can bring a change. When people say it's too hard, it's not worth it. When others say, I'm so disappointed, I will quit, leaders say, no, I am disappointed, but I won't give up. We see that how we lead ourselves, what we do in those moments of discouragement, of maybe giving up, of maybe saying is never going to work, it's not worth it. Leaders choose to lead themselves differently, and they put all of that failure, that disappointment to in a different direction, and they motivate themselves towards hard work, dedication, good habits. And many of you already mentioned the same thing. Even the fact that you're in this program is a testimony of your persistence. Even the fact that in spite of what's happening in your current situation, in your context, you're taking time to learn, to study, to invest in yourself. It's a testimony that you're one of those leaders, that you're not giving up when others are doing so. So self-leadership is really important. And the fact is that with every turn in our leadership, in our management, it starts with how we manage ourselves. Then you become a team leader and you manage others. But with every turn, with every new position or role, you have to understand that the complexity, the scope changes, it grows. And therefore, we got to lead ourselves even better because there are new values, new abilities, new information. There is a need for higher level of leadership. So we will never be done with a role, with a responsibility of leading ourselves. The more you grow, the more and the better we need to lead ourselves. Do you agree? So it's not like if we're leading ourselves today good enough, we won't have to lead ourselves better tomorrow. It never stops. And many say that when a leader stops growing, everybody stops growing. When a leader grows and keeps growing, everybody wins. So keep this in mind. We will never be in a place where we no longer have to lead ourselves. And the sad truth is many leaders fail and many companies and teams fail because somehow people think I no longer have to grow. So if there's anything you take from what we've talked about today and what we will talk, please remind yourself this. You will always have to grow. You will always need to lead yourself better. So what stops us from self-leadership, from leading ourselves better? Well, because I spend a lot of time with leaders, even before this session, I was coaching a business owner in Romania, and often leaders complain about, we don't have good people to hire. I don't have the right people in my team. They're not performing. They're lazy. They're not doing their job. There's a problem with the system. There's a problem with our country. There's a problem with the exterior. But too often, leaders don't take time to look at themselves. The main person we have to examine first is ourselves. And the challenge for leaders is we tend to look too much on the outside. We focus too much on the exterior and we don't examine ourselves. And I will ask you this. So please evaluate yourself. If you look in your schedule, how much time do you put every week? And it's visible, it's in your schedule, okay? How much time do you put every week for your self-leadership? It means you're investing time to grow yourself. And this is not, how much time you put for maybe your classes, but really to work on a competence, on an ability that you realize I have to grow in this as a leader. How much time? If you evaluate your schedule, how much time can I find in your schedule last week? Time that you put for your self leadership, for your self evaluation, self examination. I often ask this question to leaders, and thank you, Alexander. 2 hours a day is great. I often ask this question, and often the response is 0. Leaders, and whenever we become too busy leading others, we're in danger. So please make sure, no matter what position or role you have, please take time to examine yourself, to invest in yourself. Because often if we go into organizations, we will find what we call the leader's disease. It's the worst disease that a leader can suffer, and it's called the cluelessness syndrome. What does it mean is the leader is clueless. He does not know. The higher you get into a leadership position, the less you know. And think about it. You have the role of a leader in a team or an organization. How do people start treating you once you have the leadership hat? Are people as open as they used to be with you? Are people telling you the things that you don't want to hear or is not so pleasant to hear? Pretty much no. So the higher you are in a leadership position, the less you start knowing and hearing. Even in your situations, often leaders suffer from this cluelessness syndrome. They don't know because you will find leaders who think, I'm so funny, I'm such a great leader. Every time I lead a seminar or my team meetings, people leave with clarity. They know what their role and what their responsibilities are. And if you ask the team, they will say, I have no idea what he talked about. Actually, he talked so much that I stopped thinking about what he was saying. You find leaders who say, I'm a really great leader. People love being around me. If you ask their team, people say, I don't like him. So in any organization, you will find this cluelessness syndrome because leaders stop listening. Leaders are lonely at the top, and people stop telling them what they should know. So what do you do as a leader, even today, to understand what are your blind spots? What are the things that you don't see, that many others see, but you stop seeing? So what are those areas, when you're driving a car, there's a blind spot, there's a place that you cannot see by yourself. And the only way you can see it is by others telling you what you're not saying, you're not seeing. So what do you do to find out what your blind spot is? How are you actively trying to understand what is it that you don't see? Because if you don't see it, the impact, the cost is huge. And it leads to low self-awareness. Often it leads to low self-esteem, to an informational void, to an exaggerated focus on the outside and too little awareness of what's going on inside. And then you see a lot of leaders with low emotional intelligence. So if there was one thing that I would encourage all of you to do, or leaders across the world to do, is please take time. Please take time to understand your blind spots. Ask questions. Invite people to tell you what you're not seeing. Because if you don't, you will reach your ceiling. You will reach your kind of you're not growing, and the organization is not growing. The price of not growing, of low self-awareness, is huge. So please make sure that whatever you're doing, you will always have people telling you the truth. You take time to look in the mirror, and you are actively serious about understanding what your blind spots are. In other words, understanding your weaknesses. Every leader has strengths, and every leader has weaknesses. Obviously, it's really good to build on our strengths, but understanding our weaknesses, growing them, not letting them be in a situations where they're stopping us from growing, is really, really important. So a few solutions, and we'll take 5 more minutes, and then we'll have some time for questions. So who are the people in your life that are telling you what you don't want to hear? And I'm not talking about what I call those people that, whenever you're coming up with a dream, they will say, no, don't try it. Why bother? I'm not talking about those discouraging people, those negative or toxic people. I'm talking about the ones that really care about you, and they're honestly interested in your success. But the people that are telling you what they're not telling, what you're not seeing, or you don't want to hear. Diana says myself. Diana, I would recommend having somebody else, because again, the idea is sometimes even ourselves, we're telling ourselves lies. We're not telling ourselves the truth. Many times we develop ways to not tell us the truth, to not be honest about ourselves. Trust me, I do a lot of coaching, and I've seen myself not telling me the truth, lying to myself. So we need people to tell us what we don't want to hear. Our parents, our partners, our spouse, they're great people. I encourage you to have 2, 3 people, and something that I recommend, and we don't do it enough in Eastern Europe, 360 reviews, evaluations where you're receiving feedback from your peers, from people at the same level, from maybe people under you who you're leading, but also people above you, your leaders. So please, wherever you are, create an environment where people are telling themselves the truth. They're engaging in conversations that are difficult, and we're creating an atmosphere, an environment where we're telling ourselves what we don't want to hear. Alexandra says, my good friend who's older, wiser. Perfect. Yes. A mentor. Find somebody in your life, and from time to time, ask the question, hey, what am I not seeing? What are some of the things that you would encourage me as a leader, or as a person, to grow? Whenever somebody's telling you something that is uncomfortable, don't become defensive. Don't start, finding excuses or justifications for why you acted the way you've acted. Listen. Ask more questions. Say, tell me more. Thank you. I appreciate that. Always be the person that invites others to tell more. Again, I'm not talking about the toxic people. I'm not talking about the negative or the pessimistic people. No, we don't need those in our lives. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about healthy, those that will encourage you and tell you things that constructive feedback. So make sure you have those. Diana says, what do I do if no one gives me constructive criticism? Well, listen more. People will not tell you at the beginning because it's not easy. You don't know if the person will become aggressive or will become defensive. So at the beginning, people won't tell you, especially if you have not done it before. But find the ones that you trust, that you admire, and keep asking the question. So what would you tell me? What would be some things that you would recommend, you would encourage me to improve? I would say this would be my advice. The other solution that I want to encourage to you is, how do we manage not our time, but our attention? So leading ourselves, first of all, starts with self-reflection, with self-awareness, but then it starts with, how do we manage our attention? I can't emphasize enough how important is that we apply the 20-80 principle, the Pareto principle. I'm sure you've heard it, so it's not new, but the whole idea is there is 20%, often 20% of our effort produces 80% of our results. In other words, and it functions in other areas as well. For example, only 20% of the population has 80% of the wealth in the world. Okay, 20% has the wealth, 80% of the wealth in the world. As you have seen, even with engagement, only 20% of the people, between 20 and 30% of the people, produce 80% of the team's results. This principle works in many, many areas. Sometimes 20% of your clients produce 80% of your income. But apply it to yourself, only 20% of your effort, of where you put your time and effort, produce 80% of your results. And in other words, 80% of your effort, of your time, produces only 20% of the results. So obviously, understanding where I should put the 20% effort with 80% results would be really important. When we talk about time management, people want to put a lot more things into the 24 hours in a day. They're busy, they're productive, they're essential, they're irreplaceable, they're performing. What I encourage leaders to do, applying this 20-80 Pareto principle, is, how about instead of being busy, you put more time and effort into being effective, in being strategic, in multiplying yourself instead of being essential. Easy to replace yourself, not become irreplaceable. And instead of you being performant, I'm not saying you shouldn't be, but helping others be performant. Because the job of a leader is not to be the star of a team. The job of a leader is to create stars in the team. That's our role. That's our job. So where do you put most of your time and effort? Let's look at this. Most of our time, if you realize, if you evaluate your reality, is often most of our time is spent in the urgent and important, in the urgent and unimportant, and even worse, in the non or urgent and non-important. We often find ourselves responding to calls, to problems, to deadlines, to pressing things, to distractions, on doing small tasks, but very little time and effort we put in the second quadrant. But often the 20% that produces 80% results are things that are not urgent, but they're important. In other words, these things can often be postponed. We can say, no, I'm not going to do this today. There's always time tomorrow to think about prevention, time for my development or for my team's development, time for strategy, time for opportunities. We spend too little time in this quadrant. Why do you think that is? Please use the chat. I will keep going so we have time for questions. I will end with this, guys. Probably what I encourage leaders to do, and I would encourage you, is put your time in the things that will help you lead better. And that means you are able to create an atmosphere of trust in your teams, an environment where conflict is invited. Often we're running like crazy away from the conflict, or conflictual, and we don't allow people to tell their side of the story. We become too defensive or too offensive, or we run away. You know, we are often in the fight or flight situation. So be the kind of leader that invites conflict, healthy conflict, constructive conflict, because that will lead to engagement. That will lead to responsibility. That will lead to exceptional results, as we said at the beginning. So going back to our boat, we will become better leaders when we realize only less than 23% of our team is engaged. It's 70% our role as a leader to change that reality. How do we change it? Lead yourself first. Do a really good job in taking time to examine yourself, to see what are the things, your weaknesses that are drawing you back. They're not allowing you to grow. Invite people to tell you what you don't want to hear. And then put time and effort into how you manage your attention. Make sure most of your time will be in the 20% developing or growing 80% of your results. Create an atmosphere of trust. Create an atmosphere where people can say where they don't agree with you or they don't agree with others.